Nebraska's 2026 class is starting to heat up. So in today's video, I have a huge recruiting update for you guys. I'm going to be going over my big board, the most coveted Nebraska prospects that the Huskers are after, and I'm going to talk about who they are, what they bring to the table, and will Nebraska land them. So really quick, we have a lot to talk about in today's video. Make sure to hit that like button if you're fired up about Nebraska recruiting. I know I am. And hey, if you're new to the channel or just a returning viewer, make sure to subscribe. I post daily Nebraska football content, but more importantly, I post Nebraska recruiting updates just like this. So if you don't want to miss out on the next one, make sure to subscribe. You will not regret it. But without further ado, let's get into it, going over a recruiting update for the Nebraska class of 2026 in my big board, the most coveted prospects that the Huskers are after. So I'm going to go from offense to defense. I'm going to talk about the quarterbacks Nebraska's after, running backs, and so on. So let's get it started with that quarterback position, the most coveted players that Nebraska is going after in that signal caller spot. Now, of course, Nebraska has already landed a commitment from Deion Raiola. However, I've said time and time again, I wouldn't be shocked if Nebraska doubles down in this class and gets a second quarterback. Now, Oscar Rios is a guy that I want you guys to watch out for. He's a high three-star quarterback coming out of California. Nebraska was heavily after him in the spring before he committed to Purdue. Well, turns out he just decommitted from Purdue about a week or two ago, coming after Nebraska beating the Boilermakers. So looks like Nebraska is backing on the recruiting process. Again, they really wanted him a couple months ago. So I'd watch out for him. I'd also watch out for Michael Clayton. It looks like that interest has faded a little bit away after Dayton Raiola committed, but that was a guy that a couple weeks ago looked like he was going to commit to the Huskers. That's a four-star quarterback right there. And then another guy I'd watch out for is Jackson Taylor, four-star quarterback out of California, a guy who visited Nebraska in July. But again, I wouldn't expect 100% certainty that Nebraska is going to land a quarterback in the class of 2026 besides Dayton, but I think it might happen. So those are some guys I'd watch out for. Let's get into the running backs that Nebraska is going after, the guys that I really, really want, and the Huskers have a good chance at landing. Devin Walker, four-star running back coming out of Missouri. This guy is a freak. He is a stud. Super fast, super shifty, but he has the ability also to lower the shoulder. A lot of schools are in this recruiting process: Tennessee, Florida, Oklahoma, Kansas. So I watch out for those guys. But he recently visited Nebraska for the Colorado game. He loved the energy of the crowd, and he said that the team is getting better every single time he visits. So Devin Walker's number one on my big board for the running backs. But another guy to watch out for is Demarius Yates. This is a top 100 running back, borderline five-star, who's currently committed to Mississippi State, but he visited Nebraska in July. And get this, he's super close with Dante Dowdle. Those guys are childhood friends. He's currently committed to Mississippi State. They're really bad this year. Let's call it what it is. Let's say they fire their coach. Would not be surprised if Demarius Yates decommits. Nebraska is back in that recruiting process, and you never know. So those are two running backs I'd watch out for, two very, very high five-star prospects. Watch out for that. Really like what Nebraska is doing, though, in this running back recruiting class. Let's get to the wide receivers, the guys that I'm watching out for on my big board. Now, we recently picked up a three-star wide receiver commit in Davion Bonwell-Whitty. Other than that, there's not a lot of wide receivers Nebraska is heavily after. Now, they wanted to get after Mike Brown, who's a four-star wide receiver coming out of Texas, but he scheduled a visit twice and he canceled a visit twice to Nebraska. So it looks like that recruiting process is going nowhere for the Huskers. And then they also really wanted Brock Boyd, four-star, another four-star coming out of Texas, but he committed to TCU. So it is something to follow what's going on in this recruiting process for wide receivers, because we really don't have anybody who's interested in us besides the guy who already committed. Again, a long time between now and signing day in a year, but there's not really a guy here that I'm going to highlight besides those two that Nebraska's already tried to get on campus and they kind of failed. Let's get to the tight ends, because there's a lot of good tight ends to talk about in this class that are on my big board. Matt Ludwig is the number one guy I'm going to talk about. He's a four-star out of Montana, does a little bit of everything. I compared him to Carter Nelson. He recently visited Nebraska for the Northern Iowa game, and after that, a lot of crystal balls started rolling in, so would not be surprised if we add Mad Ludwig to this class. Ian Premer's another guy I want to talk about. He's a top 200 tight end coming out of Kansas. Really, right now, his recruiting process, it's us or Kansas State. If I were to guess, it's going to be Kansas State, but another really talented prospect. And hey, guys, watch out for Kansas. That state is getting better and better. They're producing 4-star, 5-stars every single year. We got to lock down that state going forward. But Ian Premer, another guy the Huskers are after. And one more added on this tight end big board. Isaac Jensen, arguably the number one player in Nebraska, big 6'7" target. We need to lock down the state and get a guy like him because he has really, really good upside. And again, he's really been shooting up recruiting rankings as of recent. So a lot of good tight ends that Nebraska is after. Let's get to the trenches, the offensive line. Who's the number one and number two guys on my big board at that spot? Shouldn't be too much of a shocker. Jackson Cantwell, officially the number one player in the class of 2026, according to On3. This guy's a complete stud. We've talked about him all summer. Offers from Georgia, Bama, Mizzou. Those are the schools I'd watch out for, who are big threats to get him. But Nebraska's right up in there with the rest of them. Of course, he has a lot of Nebraska connections. His mom grew up in Crete. He visited for the Colorado game. So I like our odds with Jackson Cantwell. But another guy who's not going to decide for a while. He was recently rocking Husker gloves in his high school game. So again, I like where Nebraska stands, which is nothing. He's not going to make it official for a very, very long time. We're probably talking about a summer commitment in 2025. Hudson Parliament is another guy who I've been very high on. He's a 4-star according to Rivals, the number one player in South Dakota. Just a complete brawler. He can play tackle. He can play guard. You might even try to flex him into center. He plays defensive line. And so much so, again, he's just a Midwest, get dirty type of lineman in schools like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa. They're after him really, really, really hard. If I were to watch out for one school, it'd be Iowa, but I think Nebraska's the betting favorite. We need to lock down Hudson Parliament. I think he's a stud. He's one of those guys where he's going to blow up. If Nebraska doesn't lock him down now, he's going to start to get offers from Bama, Georgia, Tennessee, those type of schools once they get his film. So he's a riser. He's a 4-star already. Nebraska needs to get him. Let's get to the defensive line. Some prospects who are high on my big board at that spot that Nebraska is after. Bryce Perry Wright was recently on the visit for the Rutgers game. I'll call it like it is. This guy's a long shot. He's a borderline 5-star coming out of Buford. Of course, I think the only reason he visited was because of that Dillon and Dayton connection. So there is a chance for Nebraska, but more likely than not, I think he stays in the South with a school like Georgia, Auburn, Alabama. Those schools have been after him very, very hard. But again, if Nebraska can keep winning, never count us out. Bryce Perry Wright's a borderline 5-star who I really, really want. Guy who's more realistic for the Huskers at that defensive line spot, Hunter Higgins, is somebody who we've been after for a couple months now. Coming out of the state of Kansas, another 4-star just freak athlete. He can play nose tackle. He can play D-end. You might even want to put him at jack. Really, really physical. If I were to watch out for another school there, it'd be Kansas State. But Hunter Higgins, like our odds, talked with his dad in the past. Very, very nice guy, nice family, good kid. Really, really want him at Nebraska. Again, another 4-star prospect. Let's get to the linebackers. This is a good position for Nebraska in this class. We've already found a lot of success with two guys who I think are going to commit very, very soon. Keenan Harris is one, recently visited for the Rutgers game. I think he's going to commit, within a month, within 2 months, like our odds with Keenan Harris. Super athletic, can play safety, can play linebacker, can play corner even. Of course, recruiting him to play linebacker, but just a dog. Like him, again, 4-star prospect. Hayden Cobb's another 4-star guy coming out of Texas. I think he will also commit to Nebraska. I'd only watch out for Oklahoma State in that recruiting process, but another freak athlete there. 2 linebackers who I could very well see commit in the next 2 months. Watch out for Keenan Harris and Caden Cobbs. All right, let's get to the secondary, rounding this out. Let's talk about Brandon Arrington. He's the number one on my board at this spot. No question about it. 5-star out of California, athlete, runs track. He runs a legit 4.3. So again, super speedy, super diverse, super athletic. Listed at 6'2". So really, really like Brandon Arrington. He visited in July, but if I'm going to be honest with you, I think USC is the betting favorite along with Alabama. There's only one thing you can do to get a guy like Brandon Arrington. Number one, actually, there's 2 things you can do. Number one, win football games. So when you play USC head-to-head in the Coliseum, please beat them. And number 2, NIL money. It's going to play a case in Brandon Arrington's recruiting process because he's the real deal. Another guy who I like our odds with, the number one player in Iowa, Jaden McGregory. This guy plays safety, but he can do a little bit of everything. Free safety, strong safety, rover, corner. Just a dog. I like Nebraska's odds here. Would not be surprised if he commits very, very soon. I want to throw one more at you. This guy plays safety slash corner. James Dunnigan, coming out of Manhattan, Kansas. Just a freak athlete. Another super shifty, super fast guy. You can play all over the field. 6'2", 190. He is a Kansas State legacy. So it's down to us or the Wildcats. But I think Nebraska really, really stands at a good position with him. He visited recently as well. All right, guys, deep breaths. Those are the players who I want the most in the class of 2026, and those are the guys that Nebraska has a real shot at landing. Every single guy I mentioned, I believe Nebraska has at least 25-30% chance at landing. I'm not going to throw out guys who I think Nebraska has no chance at. So absolutely pencil those guys down. Watch out for them, because we're going to be talking about them a lot over the next couple months. But I really, really like this recruiting class for Nebraska. The 2026 one is massive. Okay, if you want to win at Nebraska for the long haul, Matt Rhule, you've got to land maybe a top 15, top 10 class and maybe get a couple 5-stars. That wouldn't hurt. But what can impact that? Winning. We can win this season. We'll have a good class, no doubt about it. All right, guys, let me know down below, which prospect of the bunch do you want the most that I just landed? Is it perhaps 5-star Jackson Cantwell on the offensive line? Is it borderline 5-star Bryce Perry Wright on the defensive line? Or is it a quarterback? Let me know in the comment section. And hey, if you made this far in the video, once again, hit that like button and subscribe. And as always, folks, Hoiberg, go Matt Rhule, and see you in the next one.